Hello, people. My name is Mohini Dey, and you're watching a brand new talk show, What a Melophile Wants. Now, often what happens is a musician has the musicianship, individuality, companionship, leadership, and so many other things that are equally important when performing live on stage. But there's one thing that not many have, and that is showmanship. Why is it important? How much of it does it weigh in? What happens when this element is absent? We're going to talk about all this and some other elements in today's episode with someone very, very special. He's an American bass player known for his work with Joe Satriani, The Aristocrats, Dead Clock, Steve Vai, Mike Kennelly, and many more. Please welcome the incredible Bryan Beller. Yes, you. Yes, you.
Sound of applause. We forgot what that sounds like.
I know, right? Firstly, how are you and how are you coping up with this pandemic situation that we're going?
Well, I'm doing really well. I mean, of course, I wish I was out on tour. I had a big year of touring scheduled with Joe Satriani for his Shape-Shifting album, which came out on April 10. I mean, like right in the middle of this whole thing. And that's tough. So, we had a lot of touring scheduled for this year, which has been postponed. And there were a couple of Aristocrats legs that were postponed as well. But, you know, I mean, Moni, you spend a lot of time traveling, a lot of time on the road. And I've been doing this for a long time. I can't remember the last time that I just stayed home, wasn't working towards the next tour or the next deadline or something like that. And obviously this can't go on forever, but I feel more rested and relaxed and refreshed than I have in like my entire career.
I
So
know.
it's really weird.
It is, it is. And now we have all this time to ourselves. It's like we can do whatever we want, and there's no kind of sense of like something waiting for us, you know? It's all just like at ease.
Yeah, it definitely changes the perspective of even doing like studio recordings. Like,
Yeah,
because I do so much live work, it was always
right,
like, okay, I could do this session here between this leg and that leg. And now I
right.
have time
And
to
then I
think
can find a little time to do a little bit of my warm up or like practice or just listen to music, you know? Yeah.
right. And that's all shifted. It's all everything
Yeah.
tension and more. It's like be nice if you could find a way to have it be more like this. But can you go outside?
Yes, actually, the city where I live, things have started opening up. Small shops, big shops, except malls and pubs, obviously. Those are not open. But there has been, the news has been saying that by the 17th of May, everything should open up here in this state, which is Karnataka. Yeah, I'm
Wow.
in Bangalore. So, yeah, but Mumbai, where I'm born and brought up, my parents live there. My sister lives there. It's very bad there. Like, it's the highest number. Yeah.
Yeah. So your Mumbai is
Yeah.
like our New York.
Yeah.
Yeah,
True. Yeah.
we're lucky. Los Angeles, it has not nearly been as bad as New York. I think just because of the different culture. New York is an old-fashioned city, skyscrapers, everybody in a very small space,
Right.
public transportation. Los Angeles is much more. Everybody has more space. They're in cars.
Right.
There's not a lot of public transport here. It's just a
Right.
different
Whereas New
culture.
York is kind of crowded, and
Yeah,
same Mumbai. Mumbai is very crowded, and we get a lot of tourists there in that city. So,
yeah,
yeah. Okay, so my first question to you, Bryan, is
yeah.
based on what I said earlier. So I pick out topics up for every episode. We've spoken about leadership, we've spoken about the companionship between a drummer and bass player, we've spoken about so many other things, individuality, originality. We've spoken about the inspiration that flows through us, through our gifts that we have, such as enthusiasm, contentment, joy, and so on. So I thought today we could talk about showmanship. No one better than asking you. I thought you would be the best person to ask this to, because so yeah. I want you to tell my listeners what is showmanship to you, and how important is this element? What happens when it's not there?
Well, it's so strange that you would choose this topic for me because if anyone said to, let's say I'm 49 years old now. So let's just say if someone said to like 34-year-old me or
Hmm.
35-year-old me, we're going to
Yeah.
talk to Bryan Beller about the topic of showmanship, it would be like, why? Because,
Because you
but
have been consistent with all the swag that you have even now.
It's not consistent, actually. So
It
here's
is.
yeah, this is the thing. So we have to go back a long ways now, and think about me when I was in my 20s and when I was in my early 30s, and I would look and see other performers who I saw on stage, and they looked so natural, and so like they were projecting such amazing energy,
Right.
and I didn't feel like I had, and I didn't project any of that at all. I could get up there and I could play,
Right.
but I didn't feel like I really knew what or who I wanted to be on stage. And
Mm.
so, my playing development came way before any of my stage development. And I
Right.
remember I remember when I got the gig with Steve Vai, touring in 2007. So I'm
Mhm.
36 years old, right? I'm not like a kid anymore. And I had done gigs with Mike Keneally and other like kind of like high profile gigs, but never like a big rock stage tour because
Right.
I developed late. So I remember after the first few shows, I could play the gig, but I had to go to Steve and be like, Steve, this is going to sound really weird because we didn't go over this in rehearsal, but sometimes I don't know where to stand. Should I be in the front? Should I be in the back? Should I what's this? And he just kind of looked at me like, huh? And I'm like, he's like, okay. So like he started like, gave me the basics. Like, okay, well, you never, unless it's a solo, you never want to be in front of the act.
Mhm.
Then coordinate your movements with other people. Make sure you're, if it's somebody else's solo, you don't want to attract too much attention. All these
Right.
things are like really
Right.
basic.
Right. Right.
It still wasn't really natural for me until I started doing a metal gig.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
when I got that Death Clock band, which is a strange band internationally because it's only toured in the United States and it was based off of a television show, and we don't have to tell the whole story, but it was a metal gig. And
Okay.
suddenly I felt like myself because I grew up listening to metal. I grew up listening to Metallica
Okay.
and Black Sabbath and Slayer and
Right.
Megadeth and all classic
So
big
you were
four.
always fond of that kind of music.
And no one ever asked me to play it because they're like, oh, that's that guy that plays that fancy stuff. So when I finally got metal band, I was like, yeah, and somehow everything started to make sense.
Right. Like
And
you felt like you belonged there. Yeah.
I don't know how to explain it, but somehow my experience in touring with that metal band carried over to the Joe Satriani thing, and then
Right.
eventually the Aristocrats thing, where I really kind of found out, who I was, having to kind of be the front guy on the stage and do a lot of talking, and realizing that it's up to us to
Right.
give the
Right.
audience vibe so
Yeah,
that
that whole presence that, yeah, you have the look. It's not just about the playing. Like, especially with these kind of big gigs, you have to have the showmanship and you have to have the presence on stage. Otherwise, sometimes you can get lost in such a big band.
what's interesting, Mohini, is that I think as bass players, I mean, I see you on stage and you don't seem to have this issue at all. But I think a lot of bass players, because they're bass players, they
Mm,
naturally recede. I mean, that's our role as a supporting role.
right.
So on the one hand, we're being told, okay, well, you're a bass player, you're supporting the band, don't overplay, don't overact, don't over anything, because that's like
Mm,
again the ethos of a bass player. But at the same time, you're up there on stage and you have to project. So I
right.
think that was confusing for me for a while. And it wasn't until I actually had to be in front of the stage on the microphone for a good portion of the show that suddenly it was like, oh, right, this has to happen.
Because you're an equal part of the band. So, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't, sometimes when you're a bass player, it doesn't feel like that, especially
Right.
when
Right.
you're
Totally.
back
I can
on
totally
stage.
feel
So
that. Yeah.
it's probably an element of having to be in the front of the stage for a majority of the show that changed, well, at least for me, it changed my
Same,
perspective.
same, same. When I started playing the live shows at first,
Mhm.
I was like, just playing, no smile, no interaction, no looking at people, no looking into the audience, nothing, just playing and focusing. And then slowly, slowly, when I started playing with bigger bands, and then I started to notice that no, presence is really important, projection is really important. Otherwise, you can get lost. And fashion was always there, still there. Yeah, and that's why I guess I get spotted. And of course, being a female, that's also a spotlight.
There's advantages. It's funny. So let's
Yeah,
talk about that for a second, about
yeah,
showmanship and fashion. Like,
yeah.
that
For a
there's
guy,
nothing,
it's different. Yeah.
but there's certain things that are the same, which is that every night we go on stage, we get our picture taken from the worst possible angle, shooting up at our chin,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Like, who wants to
yeah.
see somebody like this? You know,
Yeah,
but that's what we get if we're not careful. So you have
yeah,
to find clothes that look good consistently, or
yeah.
because see the picture when you're wearing the thing that makes you look like you weigh 400 pounds or makes you look like an oak. and you go, oh wow, I should never wear that again.
Oh
And then
God.
after a while, you start to realize kind of what works, and then you go with it. But that's like a part of being a performer.
Right. Absolutely. And I don't know if you know, but like I design my own clothes and I stitch them.
About that, I heard
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, so everything that I wear in my gigs and stuff, most of them are all designed by me. So I already have a picture of how I'm gonna look like on stage, even before getting on stage.
Yeah, well, it all kind of goes back to a bit of branding and marketing. And you use these words; they sound corporate, and everyone goes,
Yeah,
ah. But that's actually when you're out there, especially in this day and age when we're all doing our own personal marketing.
right.
That's super important.
That's a
So
big part,
if
yeah.
you're designing your own clothes and you have this very unique kind of flamboyant look and everything like that, it's like
Yeah.
people, it's all a part of the same thing. When they recognize
Yeah.
you, for the look,
You're
the
not
playing,
just an artist or a
right?
musician, but you're actually that whole brand, like you
The
said.
whole package. Yeah, the whole
Yeah, the
package.
whole package, yeah.
Yeah. So
Awesome.
showmanship plays, that's a part of it. I mean, yeah, of course
Yeah,
there's some people who are super reserved. I mean, like you see uh what would be a good example of someone who might be more reserved, like Radiohead, right?
right. Or
They're not
even
out.
or even Gary Willis, like he doesn't show it on the face, but like he's dancing and he's
Yeah. Yeah.
playing. We
Right.
can, even if he's not moving much, our eyes, ears, everything's there,
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, you could be Billy Sheehan and have the whole thing, or
Yeah.
or you could be John
Like he's
Patitucci,
a
have that kind
performer.
of.
Like again,
Yeah.
Billy is a performer.
Right.
You're a
Right.
performer.
Yeah.
I think my performance started kicking in after I joined the Japanese band recently, which is Bees.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
and
here's the thing. Didn't you start by doing uh like the Indian big orchestra stuff? You were a part of a big ensemble, right?
yes, I worked with Mr. A.R. Rahman, but then
Yeah.
in that kind of setup, there is no head banging,
But
there is no script, there is no choreography.
were you sitting down for that as part of an
Yes,
orchestra?
sometimes,
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes,
So
yeah.
so I mean,
There was no like direction,
what was the transition like for you, like when you were doing a lot of those gigs to suddenly being on stage with only 3 or 4 people and there's a lot of
I
space?
felt like I was missing that. And when I had that opportunity to show that, I was like, this is what I want to do. Because I feel like a diva. And this is what I want, you know? Like you said, coming on in the center of the stage and singing and playing bass. That's what I do with the Japanese band. So when I started playing with them from last year, it was like, wow, this is actually where I belong, it felt natural. There was
Yeah.
no like negative energy or like a sense of like, whatever.
I think that in the end, the best way to project is naturally. I mean,
Yeah.
I had fooled myself into thinking that I wasn't comfortable on stage. I needed to stay in the back. That's why I started playing bass, blah, 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 blah. But once I found places where I could be comfortable, like in the metal band and my role in the Joe Satriani band, which involves a lot of crowd participation because
Right.
basically just Joe on one side of the stage, me on the other side of the stage, and then the keyboard and the drums are backstage
Right.
because they have to be. So you got
Right.
to fill up that part of the stage.
Like you asked Steve, for example, that what do you want me to do? Like, what do you want me to stand? Where do you want me to stand? So same, even in the Japanese band, since I didn't know, sometimes we get like lost. What do they actually want me to do? Like, I know I'm playing, but then in terms of performance, what do we do? Do we stand there? Do we move? I don't know. Sometimes some people take it negatively if moving too much, that, oh, spotlight's taken away. And especially me being a girl bass player, if I do that, then all the eyes are on me. So I don't know if I should do that or not. So then there's a person who is the show director, and it's his job to like come up to
Oh,
musicians. Yeah.
okay. Well,
Yes.
that's cool. I mean, so that's interesting that it's almost a relief, I would think, to have somebody like that because I like when I
Yeah.
Joe gig, I almost thought, well, I should have the same conversation with Joe, but Joe didn't want to have that conversation. He's like, oh, we'll just go up there and figure it out.
Okay.
It'll work itself out because you like
Right.
Steve would rehearse for a tour for like five
Right.
weeks.
Totally.
Joe rehearses for 5 days.
Yeah.
That's it. And so we would get up there and things would naturally happen. Like there'd be a moment where you look at each other and then maybe you walk a little closer the next night. And then the next night you're standing right next to each other and you're playing and you look at each other and you're like, okay, this is a thing. We're going to do this every day and you don't have to talk about it. And the same thing happens with the band. and the drummer and all the rest of that. And happened with the Aristocrats too. You know, there are little things.
Yeah.
We're not moving there because we have our stations and that's fine. But we
Right.
have where we know we're going to toss it back and forth to
Same,
each.
same. Like the director, he just comes and he just says that, you're free. You can move around. When a director says that, so you're free. You're not like stuck up to something, thinking that no, people might take it differently. So
But
then
they have a light show, right? That's
they have a
coordinated.
light show.
So
Yes, they're
that's a
coordinated.
plus thing.
Yeah. But then again, from the very first show, it was nothing decided. So for the first three shows, there was no me coming in the front or anybody coming in the front and interacting with the singer or the guitar player. Then I started feeling comfortable. So from the fourth show, I started to kind of come in the center during my solos, and then slowly coming more in the front, even not during my solos, just interacting with the singer during like maybe cool grooves or like funkier grooves or some cool tones. And then so those were not decided, it just happened. And
Right.
then it
That's
became
what.
a pattern, like where the singer knew that I was going to come, so he would make sure he comes in that spot before.
Right,
And
exactly. Yeah, you start to set
yeah,
up down
yeah,
walking,
yeah. It
and
becomes
then
natural. Yeah.
and the lighting guys start to realize, oh, this is a thing,
Right.
and then they give it to you, and so you're actually
Right.
creating the show on the spot there, which is, that's the way that that's the way that it
I
should be.
know.
I
Presence
mean,
of mind, not just presence of physical
right.
body.
And it's cool that you have that much autonomy, because there are shows that are really like super installed. Like I know some people who do the Cirque du Soleil shows, and that stuff, it takes a committee for a movement to change, for
Right.
a line cue to change, for
Yeah. So
those are
everything, every
really,
single intricate details are like
really,
scripted. Yeah.
really set shows. And of course, there's showmanship, there's projection, but like it's a script.
It's a script. Yeah. My God. Yeah. That's a job.
I know that's a different thing.
Okay, now I'm curious, how do you pick up bass out of all the other instruments? Because we've never spoken about this, so.
Well, this has got to be one of the dumbest ever explanations for why anyone ever started an instrument, and I'm ashamed, but it's the truth. I started playing classical piano when I was 8 years old, and then
Wow.
my parents were like, "Well, you should play an instrument in the orchestra," and I was 10, and I really didn't want to play in the orchestra because I was a little brat, and so I thought to myself, I know. I'll just play the most obnoxious instrument that they won't want to have to carry around so that I won't have to be in the orchestra anymore. And so I chose the acoustic bass.
Oh.
And so that's how I started playing bass. And I did that for 3 years and was in the orchestra. And it was all right. And then when I was 13, the strange thing is I heard this, the Stray Cats, the rockabilly band from the 80s.
Right, right.
Yeah, and they had a song called "Rock This Town," which is like the most basic kind of like acoustic plucking line. Ba-doom, doom, 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 doom,
Okay.
doom. And I was like, finally, something cool I can play on acoustic. So I sat there and I played that for like an hour, and and my hand looked like it had been like put through a cheese grater. It was completely shredded, and I was like, this sucks. I want to play electric. This is awful. And so an acoustic tune made me want to start playing electric, and that's how I started playing electric bass.
Oh.
It's the lamest explanations ever, but it's true.
So is that the time when you actually got into Berkeley, or was that much later?
No, that was when I was 13 years old when I made that switch. And I actually told the orchestra director, I said, I just want to play in the jazz band electric bass. I don't want to play in the orchestra anymore. And
Okay.
he didn't have another acoustic bassist in the orchestra because it was a New Jersey town. The music
Right.
program wasn't very good at the time.
Uh-huh.
And well, if you want to play in the jazz band, you have to play in the orchestra also. I said, you know what? I'm not going to play in either of them. And I quit the whole music program.
Oh,
And
shit.
And I just played electric bass on my own and played piano for 5 years. And I learned stuff by ear and I learned theory. But honestly, I was really, really lazy. And when I got to Berkeley when I was 18 years old, I thought I was hot shit because I could play some Led Zeppelin songs and Rush songs. And I got there and I was like, oh my God, I should have been
People can
practicing.
play.
Smoke pot all that time.
So by that time, when you got into Berkeley, did you already know that you want to do music professionally?
Yeah, I knew that it was one of the only things that I wanted to do.
Okay.
I didn't have much of a drive to do anything else. Maybe
You
some
didn't want to do. You didn't
journal.
even think of doing anything else.
I thought about being a journalist. I thought about doing like news or political writing and stuff like that. I'm really, really glad I didn't decide to do that because God, that world is depressing. So I'm glad I chose.
Oh God, crazy. So, who were your major influences that helped you build your unique sound that you have?
Well, tonally, it's weird because I know that my earliest bass influence is John Paul Jones of Led Zeppelin, but like that wasn't really a tonal influence for me. Like I ended up kind of gravitating towards more of a brighter, aggressive sound for many years before I diversified. And so, Chris Squire from Yes was a big, that pick on a round wound string, that really bright attack, aggressive thing. I always dug that early on. And John Patitucci, I felt, even though I'm not a jazz player, I always really liked the fact that you could hear him dig into the string and you could hear the attack on him. Like, in other words, like there's this school of players like kind of Gary Willis and Matt Garrison. And I went to school with Matt Garrison, by the way.
Oh, wow, really?
Oh yeah, I showed up in a bass lab, like the very beginning class, and we're all doing our thing, and there's like 10 bass players in there. We're all playing this easy stuff, and I played it, and I was like, oh, I thought that sounded pretty good, and then there's this kid next to me, short, dark skin, short hair, and he started playing, and he just sounded like, he sounded like Jocko, but better, and I'm like, who are you?
Who are you?
It was Matt Garrison. He's 18 years old. Anyway, there's this whole school of guys who play that really, and women who play this really dark, smooth kind of thing. And one of the reasons why I like Patitucci's jazz fusion playing is because you can really hear his bite. You can hear him dig into the string like almost like a soul player.
Right.
So I like that sound, that really kind of transparent, crisp, clean sound that he got. That was to me. Of course, I listened to Jocko like everybody else. But I didn't spend a lot of time with the bridge pickup only and my hand all the way at the back pickup.
Your tone's completely different.
I never really
because you grew up listening to metal music and rock music.
And then there's Cliff Burton, of course, who I got that kind of the distorted wah thing from. But the real major kind of rock influence for me is Tim Comerford from Rage Against the Machine. I remember when the first Rage Against the Machine album, An Evil Empire, came out, and I heard the bass sounds on Bulls on Parade and Killing in the Name, and I was like, that is the sound that I want. When I'm playing rock, I want it to sound like that. And I worked years on kind of getting a finger attack, because he plays fingers, not pick. A finger attack with an overdrive pedal and a nice bright jazz bass to get that together. So that if I wanted to play clean, you would still hear a nice clean tone and you'd have a little bit of brilliance to it. But wanted to dig in and play overdrive, you could really nail it. So there's a lot of different playing influences, but the main rock, that aggressive thing, it's really Timmy from Rage.
Oh, cool. No, I don't know if you remember, but last time when we spoke, we were talking about how my right hand, the shape and the positioning and everything. And you told me you have this very cool technique where you, if the sound's really fast, instead of doing that, you would do this. Right?
Yeah, actually, it's with two fingers.
With two fingers. Okay.
Yeah, so and which is a bit of a strange thing because I don't know if you can see. Obviously your middle finger is always going to be a bit longer than your hip and your index finger.
Right.
So the challenge, if you see the string is here, okay, the challenge is to make it so that both fingers are attacking at the same point, which means you need to bend your middle finger a little bit.
Right. Understood. Yeah.
And then you can do this and flick back and forth.
Okay.
And I'm not amplified right now, but let me see here. I'm just going to point this down. So in other words, it's one thing to do the downstroke. Everybody can do this.
Right.
Even the thing. But the trick is to flick up.
Right.
So you got to be able to practice making that even.
Right. That control, yeah.
Exactly. And then now the trick is, in order to make that really, really work for a long period of time, you want to have a lot of gain, and you want to have overdrive on there too, so that your fingers don't have to work as hard. You really want to be as relaxed as possible when you're doing that, but you have to generate the velocity somehow.
Right.
you
It's
know.
the same thing when you're playing something fast, you're actually not digging in or putting any pressure on the fingers. It's the volume, and you're actually really soft in here. It's just the
Exactly.
tips of the fingers. And of course the tone that you said, EQs and everything.
Yeah, you're
That's so
just
cool. When did you come up with this technique? Like how did it come up?
okay. This is funny. So I remember when I was a kid and I got the Metallica Master of Puppets album, and oh, this is so stupid. Why don't I should just plug in. Uh, I'll just give me 1 second. It's right here.
Sure.
Uh, all right. Okay, so I'm gonna just point this down here for a second. So I remember being a kid and getting the Master of Puppets album by Metallica,
Okay.
and being so excited about all those lines.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember hearing the song "Damage Incorporated," which
Okay.
is the last song on the album, and
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty fast. You know, the tempo is 1, 2, 3, 4 to get, right? And so the guitars are going, and the bass is playing right along with it. And I knew he was playing with his fingers. I knew he wasn't a pick player, and I'm like, well, how can you possibly do that?
Uh-huh.
I know. I didn't know that he was a flicker, that he was doing it also with one finger and alternating fingers.
Oh,
That's how he was doing it. But I just
flicking
remember
technique.
flicking. Yeah, I just remember thinking to myself, well, there's got to be a way to go diddle at it, and I can't go. There's no way I could do that fast enough.
Yeah.
I started going, there's that, and then up. Okay, so now the riff, if you play it really slow, it's okay, so here it is
Mm-hmm.
up tempo. 1, 2, 3, 4. And
Wow.
so I developed that when I was, whoa, there we go. I developed that when I was like 17 years old.
Oh, cool.
And then I never used it again. Like,
Oh, okay.
because no one ever asked me to play metal. So
Okay.
like, I was just like, all right. And I forgot that I even could do it. So fast forward now, that was 1987 or something, 88.
Right.
Fast forward to 2008, and I'm being asked to play in this band called Death Clock. And there was a passage that had to go like this, where it was 1, 2, 3, 4. And I was like, oh my God, I can use it again. I can do it. I
Oh,
can do
shit.
it.
That's
So,
great.
yeah. And when you crank up the compression and you crank up the drive and it just gets really, really nice, and you barely have to move your fingers. And as long as you don't
Right.
have 3 minutes in a row, you're good.
Right. Otherwise, all the stamina is gone.
Yeah, you can't do it for 8 minutes.
But
It
do
just
you do anything to keep up your stamina? Say, for example, you're doing like a 3-hour concert every night.
Well, there was never. I would first of all, I wouldn't want to be in a band where I had to do that for 2 hours a night. I want to play. So basically, there's a stamina that you do need to build up, and some of it is just adrenaline. I noticed that, like when I would play, like there was this one passage where I had to do it for quite a while. So what I would do is at the very end of it, I would kind of bail out and then get back into a groove so that we could really nail the ending. So because you always want transitions to be really, really super strong.
Correct.
That's more important. It's the same thing with like pedal switching. like you always want to make sure that even if you have to bail out a couple notes early and really, really simplify your line, you
Right.
know, do that and make sure your pedal switches are really great so that
Yeah,
when
or
the down,
just take a pickup and then just do
right,
it.
so that you can really punch in the face when the downbeat.
Right. Yeah, I
So
had to do that. So, like I'm not a electronic kind of person. I've never used pedals in my life. I always used to go direct, but then the time I started playing with the Japanese band, that's when I started using the drive and overdrive. I mean, the overdrive and distortion pedal and the booster and everything. And that's when that gig kind
a
of
big
pushed
difference.
me. Yeah, it kind of pushed me to be better at it and to learn more things about pedals and the equalizations and all that. And yeah, like switching, like you were saying, transitions.
The other thing, Mohini, and especially when it's a loud rock stage, although you only
Oh,
realize, even when you're on a loud rock stage, you come back into like realizing that it works on album mixes too, is that always having a little bit of overdrive and a bass signal in a rock band is actually a good thing, because that little bit of harmonic distortion actually helps define the note.
mm,
Otherwise, I mean, you could take all the guitar out of your monitor if you want, but what fun is that? And then you're going to have a
yeah,
hard time hearing your own note. So adding a little
right,
bit of
right,
overdrive helps kind of settle it in the mix. And
right.
a lot of times the front of house guy appreciates it too.
That's nice. I didn't know that. I'll try it. And I'm
Yeah.
gonna try this flicking technique as well. I'm
Oh, I'm
trying to get it.
sure in 10 minutes you'll have it better than me.
No, I'm gonna send you a video. Actually, recently, like 2 days ago, I recorded on this guy's song. He's a mandolin player,
Yeah.
and his mandolin is like this small, this cute small, and he's like a 5.9 foot guy, and it looks so tiny. It's so funny. And every time we play together, I'm like, I think I should play that. You should play the bass.
Have you ever seen the technique that Norwood Fisher from Fishbone and Muzz Skillings from Living Color used to do for
No.
they did this. I can't do it, but somehow they were doing it with their thumb, like that, like just going
Whoa.
like a
Okay, that's hard.
buzzsaw.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you listen to the first song on the Living Colors Time's Up album called Time's Up, you'll
Yeah.
hear feelings going up and down the neck, and just imagine that he's doing this with his thumb to do it. It's just
Do
complete.
you know this other bass player called Nathan Navarro?
I've heard of Nathan Navarro. I
So
haven't
you know
seen
what
him.
he does? He takes a drilling machine and he puts some yeah, and he puts like a thing on top and then he just puts it close to the strings and it's doing the job. He's just moving his left hand. I'm like, whoa, that's easy.
There's a guitarist who did that too. It's the guy from I think the guy from Freak Kitchen. Is that it? Matthias Eklund.
Right,
Right?
Matthias,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. There's some great stuff with the drill and all the rest of that
Like
stuff.
imagine somebody doing that on stage. So hilarious. Oh my
Somehow we got from showmanship to here. I don't know how we managed that.
that would be amazing. That's
Metallica.
very entertaining.
That's what it was. We were talking about Metallica. That's what it was.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So, my next question to you is how do you learn and practice new things when you're busy traveling on tour? Like when you're touring, how is the practice routine like then and now when you have all this time to yourself?
This is well, for me, it's always the same. Here, let me put this back down.
Oh,
Because it's about listening. If you think about it, when you want to learn like a song that you really know, it's so much easier because you've been listening to it your whole life. Like
right.
if you wanted to learn like a rock and roll by Led Zeppelin, it's just like all those basic rock songs, you already know them. So when you sit down to play them, you have the advantage of like, oh yeah, I know the verses here, the choruses here, that.
Right.
But meanwhile, I think a lot of people process new music that they need to learn, like before they even know what the form of the song is, and before they even
Yeah.
feel the song in its entirety, they're already sitting down and trying to learn the first line to it. And to me, that's not really the right way to go about it, or it's not the most efficient way to go about it,
True.
especially if you're traveling. You don't always have an instrument in front of you. You don't always have the ability to do that, but you always have the ability to listen.
Mm.
So what I do is I listen to something kind of over and over and over that I'm going to learn in my spare time, whenever it happens to be, leading up to the time when I'm actually going to sit down with the instrument and then play
So
it. And
then
then
you already have the sketch
yeah,
in
you,
your
yeah, you can see the map.
same. I do the same.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that way, it's not just about you're sitting there trying to figure out three things at once. Oh, what key is it? What time signature is it? What's this line? And oh, wait, is that the chorus? Did the form just change? You're not
Right.
thinking like that. You're just thinking, okay, I know it's verse, chorus, bridge, solo section, Odyssey, bridge, outro,
Yeah.
and then the keys change here, and so now I'm going to sit down and I'm going to learn it. And I know
Right.
it feels like
And
this,
it
and I know
saves so much time as well, actually.
it definitely does,
Yeah.
because you can't just be in front of your instrument all the time if you're traveling. It's not possible. And so
Correct.
I ended up doing that same thing when I'm home too. I won't just pick up the instrument and just be like, how does this go? I just listen to it.
Right,
Just listen
right.
to it.
Yeah, I
If,
would usually do that like on the flights. I just
yeah.
listen to music and try and learn it in my head. Yeah. That's cool.
And
So,
if you have to make a chart, make a chart. But
yeah.
listen to it a few times, and then you're like, oh, even with that'll even help with the chart.
Right, right, right. When you have no time, this works the great. Yeah. Awesome. Um, how much of your playing in your gigs, especially, is completely improvised over chops and patterns that you've already worked on before? And if it's both, then how do you keep that balance?
Well, it depends on the gig. You
Hmm.
know, the I think the irony for me is that a gig like the Aristocrats, where it's like really kind of hauling ass most of the time,
Right.
I will make sure that, especially for the form parts, that I'll push the form and I'll do little things here and there, but I try not to do too much more than the part already is asking for, because
Right.
that's
Because
where you,
firstly, you're doing a part of the keyboard player as well. So the more lesser you play, more body you give.
yeah, and also, you have to remember who you're on stage with. I mean, Marco and Guthrie can really produce a lot of velocity and density very, very quickly.
Cool.
So if the bass is always pushing into that,
Right.
then that's going to end up being a bit of a mess. So even though I am interacting, I try and this is going to sound weird, but even though it's kind of always hauling ass, I try and keep it subtle. Now, if there's wide open parts in solo sections like Get It Like That and other parts like maybe D Grade, Fuck Movie Jam, and a couple of other kind of open tonality, open sections, yeah, of course we'll always screw around and
Mhm.
do stuff.
Or
But
like booze fuckers. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, yeah. But I really actually try and do my best to kind of set the stage for what they're doing, unless it's a moment where I'm supposed to really do something.
Right.
Whereas in the Joe Satriani gig, you know, of course there's form there, but when those sections open up,
Yeah.
because the usually the tempos aren't quite so fast, and because there's a bit more space in the arrangements,
Hmm.
there's more room to kind of play more.
True.
So I didn't really realize that paradox until I did a couple of cycles together.
Mm.
Uh, and so the great thing about the Aristocrats, and Mike Keneally taught me this first,
Okay.
uh, at if it's a really complicated arrangement and form, you just always got to be there on your brain. You really have to be up to the millisecond in here. So if there is something new that happens, that you
Mm.
can react to it in real time, and just
Right.
even a little gesture can go a long way in a
Hmm.
really arrangement. But you don't want to be pushing it in every direction all the time. It's even in a dense arrangement, and some would argue, especially in a dense arrangement, you really
Hmm.
want to the song. And
True.
I one of the reasons why the Aristocrats, we always say that we're not a jazz band. It's not just we played the melody and now we're all going to solo, 2 minutes each or 3 minutes each, and then come back
Right.
to the form. That's not it. We're a
Mm.
rock. These are rock song structures.
Right. Right. Very cool. It's different how Indians work such a different way, and then the like West Side it works so differently.
Wait,
It's a cultural thing, I guess.
tell me more about that.
Um, it depends. Like again, from band to band, it depends from person to person. It depends. Sometimes you go into the studio, and if you're recording for a song, you will have a chart. And most of the time, you won't have a chart. You'll have to make your own chart. Some people here in India, they can't. Most of them can't read and write music in India. It's all spontaneous. They have really good ears, and they'll pick up things like that. I
Yeah.
guess. I guess that's why my grasping power is really good. But I also can read and write because my father taught me to.
Yeah.
Thanks to
Well,
him.
the reading and the writing, I think that that kind of all goes back to the underlying nature of music theory, which is that it
Right,
just
right.
it's a language in order to be able to
I mean, you
communicate.
don't have to. You
All
don't
right.
have
Yeah.
to have that. It's not compulsory in any way. If you can the main parts of doing music is feeling it and putting the soul into it. If you can learn things like that fast just by hearing it, then good for you. You don't even have to write. If you can just understand what the person wants.
But the thing is that until we reach this exalted state of humanity where we can all just look at each other and I can just go, "Hey, Mohini," and you'll know that what that means is that, oh yeah, you wanted me to go to the bridge, it's going to be in 5/4, and then it's going to change keys over here and all
Right.
that. I don't have to
Yeah.
explain any of it. Then, until everyone in the world can do that, until then, we have to have
Yeah.
some means of communication to express, when something is not
Right.
absolutely going. It's like, oh, wait a minute, no, it's in 5, it's not in 7, it's in 4, it's not in 6. No, actually,
Right.
this is more of a Dorian thing, not quite, not really
Yeah.
a Phrygian thing, blah, 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 all that stuff. I
Yeah.
get away from it as fast as possible and you just play music. But
And sometimes there are situations when you're like called for a gig, like we have a gig tonight, then you're not going to have time to explain, or you're not going to be explained by someone. That time you need charts and you need to be able to read and write if you want to do those kind of gigs, you
right,
know?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. If you want to
Yeah.
do, yeah,
Right, but most of them here they can't read and write, so that's out. you know, yeah. Here, the Carnatic classical musicians, Hindustani classical musicians, most of them, it's like we don't do any rehearsals, just go on stage, perform. That's it. So it's like on the spot. It's like 90% of the gigs are like that. Can you imagine?
it's crazy.
Like I'm gonna
And you are all, is that because, are you able to do that because you're all drawing on a body of work that's like kind of like accepted as like inside the lines in the Carnatic world? Like someone starts playing a certain motif, everybody's like, oh yes, I
We know
understand.
that. Yeah.
I know
It's
that.
like jazz standards. It's like
Yes,
jazz
got it,
standards. Yeah.
got it, got it.
So we know that song. Okay, we know that Tihai. We know that Konako. Okay, and it's also a little bit inclined towards mathematics when it comes to resolving a song or resolving a solo or resolving some verse, some bridge, and somebody's gonna go like, oh, takadimita, 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 and then we know that, okay, I know the rest. We know what's
That's
coming up.
right. That's the cue
Yeah,
to the
yeah,
section.
yeah. But not many people are good at that because not many people are good at mathematics, right? And there are different ways of interpreting it. There are different possibilities. So you don't know which one's coming up. It could be anything. But then when the leader actually leads us, like the first time when he plays it and we hear it, we know, okay, the second time and the third time it's going to be that. So it's like that.
My very first exposure to any of this was the Jonas Hellborg Icon album. Are you familiar with that album?
No,
Uh,
no, no. But I
oh
know
yeah,
Jonas. Yeah.
yeah. What is the name of the musicians that he collaborated with? And oh God, I'm pulling up Spotify right now to see if I could find it.
Oh, okay.
Hang on a second. Yeah, of course he's not. Oh, wait a minute. Is that it? No. No, this album is not. This album is not on here. But
Yeah.
oh yeah, wait a minute. There it is. Kali's Son. Oh, that's from my. Is that from my library? That's what it is. Hang on. I know this is not a good interview bit here. It's
It's cool. It's just a
featuring uh Selva Ganesh and
comment.
Niladri.
Ganesh, yeah, he's a good friend. We work together all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. And Niladri Kumar.
Niladri Kumar is also somebody
Yes. So
I've
this
grown
album
up
that
playing with. Yeah.
Jonas Hellborg did this album of
Both
of
of them. Yeah.
much more traditional Indian stuff, and that was the very first time I ever heard anything like that. And
Really.
I was in my late 20s, so I hadn't heard any of it.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, I think, like I said, we're culturally so diverse that it's very normal for us here. But then when the Western people hear it, then it's like, oh, okay, that's different, you know?
And I think that even being in the States is even somehow more removed from it than being in Europe.
Right.
I think
Absolutely.
that's the nature of the cultural vibe of the
Yeah,
States.
it's just like how if you would come here and you start staying here and playing with musicians here, you would get the most amount of recognition because you're a foreigner, right?
Yeah.
And of course you can play as well, but you're also a foreigner coming
Yeah,
from
it's
a
like,
different
what is
country.
that? It's like, what is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you have a different voice because you worked with people there, and that's why you've picked up those different things. Whereas we worked here, and we have a different way of working and way of approaching things. And even even when we're learning music, it's so different. Like I would see time as I wouldn't say 5/4. I would say taka takita. You
Right.
know, you
Yes.
know
Yeah.
or like phrasings. If you were soloing and I'm picking up somebody's solo, and if the phrase goes like 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 ta ta, I'd be like takatimi takatimi takita takati,
Huh?
yeah. So it's so funny, but it's interesting.
Well, the language is universal, even if there are different dialects.
Yeah, yeah, and we're still meeting at the same point, so
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
that's the magic.
Right.
Yeah. So now you're part of Aristocrats, like we all know. I want to ask you, what is the ultimate direction all the three of you have when you're writing songs, or say like you have an idea and the rest of Marco and Guthrie are like expanding that idea. So what's the direction you'll go for? How do you make that decision of what to go to? Like, this is the direction we want to go.
This is the interesting thing is that we do not have those conversations when we're writing because we
Of
all
course.
write in isolation. Every album has 9 songs and we write 3 songs ourselves. We complete the demos ourselves.
Hmm,
So we present I mean, I love programming drums. It's one of my favorite things to do because I'm a frustrated.
really? Wow.
Yeah.
You gotta
I'm not.
teach me. I don't know anything about
Oh,
programming.
it's so much fun. Yeah, I'm just a superior drummer. You can make it do anything. Poor Marco. Ask Marco. Sometimes I'll play.
But he
Brian,
plays bass when he
I,
programs.
exactly. Yes, on keyboards, you make
Yeah,
impossible patterns.
yeah.
But I'm not a good guitarist. But if you give me enough time and enough editing and Pro Tools, I can put something together that Guthrie will understand and be like, "Oh, okay, you want me to do this?" And I'll be like, "Yes, thank you." And then Guthrie can do that with bass and drums, and Marco can do it with bass and guitar. So we do that, and we give the songs to each other. And sometimes we don't even really know what the direction of the record is until we exchange those files.
Did you guys like try it out, like play once and then be like, oh, okay, okay, that sounded good, so we go for that. And if something didn't sound good, you just don't do it.
It doesn't really go down like that because we don't. It's not like we live in the same town, so we can't just get together at the band house and
Mhm.
like do our rehearsal. So what we do
That
is
kind of scenario has never happened.
no, it's never happened. We what we do is we get together in the studio and we work up the songs as quickly as we can because we're all coming from such different areas. Guthrie's in the UK,
Right, right.
and I used to live in Nashville when this all started. Now I'm in LA, but I still don't live around the corner from Marco, and so we have to get together and kind of hash it out as quickly as we can. We know each other well enough now that we can write to each other's strengths, and
Right.
we know. We have a sense just from each other's demos of whether or not something's going to work.
Right.
So when we get together, we just kind of play it and then it becomes an Aristocrat song. But
So
we
even
don't,
before playing, okay, this is something we like, so we're gonna
yeah,
do that.
we listen to the demos first and we exchange emails and stuff like that. We're like, yep, this is in, this is in, this is in.
That's
And,
cool.
you know, uh, Marco's the one who writes, 30 songs, for when he only,
I know. Oh my God.
Guthrie and I aren't like that. Guthrie and I are
Mhm.
struggling to write our 3.
And
We
Marco's songs are very complicated.
Yes, and some of them lend themselves to trio arrangements more than others. So, we have to kind of navigate that world a little bit.
Right.
And also recognizing that it's not our first album anymore and that we allow ourselves a little bit of room with overdubbing and arrangements and stuff like that.
Right.
So
Right.
that's really it. For Guthrie and I, it's like we just have to somehow finish
How
our
did
3.
you react? How did you react when Marco wrote the song "Mr. Kempinski"?
Well, Mr. Kempinski was a solo song of his. That wasn't an Aristocrat
Oh,
song.
okay. So he
Yeah.
programmed everything, I guess.
Oh yeah. He that was on
But
an
have
album.
you guys ever played that live?
Of course, yeah. We played Mr. Kempinski on the very first tour because we only had one Aristocrats album, and so we
Okay.
needed to
Some
supplement.
songs from each, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We each of us had some solo material in there as well.
Right.
But Kempinski actually lays out pretty well as a trio piece. It ends up sounding like an instrumental
Was
police
it
song.
Mr. Kempinski or was it something else? I can't remember, but it had like so many time signatures and just
It
That
must
song.
have been something other than Mr. Kempinski, because
Probably.
that's
I think I'm not saying the name right.
was it. Did you mean Blues Fuckers
No, 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 no. I'm gonna find out. I'm gonna
or
find out.
Boing 'em in the back?
No, no.
Uh, oh, that's not. We never did that song. I think I know which song you're talking about. That it's on Comfortably Homeless, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's called Checkpoint. Or wait a minute, hang on a second. I'm gonna pull it up because I know that song. Oh God, I don't have it on here anymore because I have a new laptop.
Yeah, it goes like, people start trading in that song. It's like.
Hold on. I think it's called Three in a Row. No. Oh, this is gonna bother me because I know exactly what song you're talking about.
No, I think I have it on my phone.
Or is it
Hold on.
is it on Country? Oh God. Dun 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 dun. And it keeps twisting around over and over and
Yeah,
over.
yeah, like some 15 and then 7 and then
Yeah,
5.
it's really hard.
Yeah, really hard. We
Uh,
played it with Pliny.
oh my God.
Yeah, he was so.
It's not
I
that
felt
one.
so
It's not
sad for
that
him.
one. It's not that one. Blah 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 blah. Still going back. Round Trip. No, that's not it. I played that one. That's a really hard one. Was it Butterflies? Butterfly.
Butterflies! Yeah.
Oh my God. That song is a nightmare.
Oh my God.
That song is a fucking nightmare. I remember that song.
Yeah, that was a
No,
nightmare for me too.
you can
Yeah.
imagine if you go back to that same album, me and Mike Keneally and Marco played the song called Round Trip, which
Okay,
sounds like
I'll hear it.
sounds like a circus falling down the stairs. Anyway, Butterflies is a really, really hard song.
Butterflies, yeah, very, very hard song. Oh my God.
Yeah. So I mean, we try not to in the Aristocrats kind of max out on like difficult forms.
Right.
I mean, for difficult passages, because I mean, like, there's already so much density in what we do, and I think if you go into each one of our solo catalogs, Guthrie and Marco and me, you'll find like a more pronounced version of what it is that we do. If you go into Guthrie's solo catalog, and especially you because you played his live show, it really is a fusion gig.
Yes, yeah.
The difference, for me, if you go into my solo thing, especially with my most recent album, Scenes from the Flood, it's just straight up instrumental progressive rock thing.
Right.
Not a lot of like, of technical aggression and stuff like that. I mean, it's there more than like a pop album, but it's just not quite as much density and there's more melodic and soundscapey stuff.
Right.
And with stuff, he really like just takes the brakes off and sometimes really just goes deep into the complexity thing. Right. And so we each take a portion of that and bring it into the Aristocrats, but we don't bring our whole thing in there because now we know what we are as a band. So we
and
lean
what works the best, yeah.
Right. We lean on the parts of our writing that will work best for the band.
Right.
So
and we're complementing each other, yeah.
I won't bring in an ambient piece. Guthrie won't bring in like his version of like a jazz standard where you play it and everybody's so attentive. And Mark will bring in a song like Butterflies because we're,
yeah.
just kind of like that's not what we're really doing. We have a thing that we're doing as a unit and we have a better grasp on what that is than we used to.
There's good equation.
Yeah, that 9 years ago. Yeah.
Right. That's amazing. This one is a good one. Everyone is trying to copy everyone and sound like someone, right? I guess people do that because they feel they don't have their voice, right? So how do you think one can find their voice and build towards having that originality?
Well, I think the best way for it to happen, just like everything, is for it to happen naturally. I think that there is a tendency to actually do the opposite thing that you just described, which is that people are afraid to like go into their influences, especially when writing, but also when learning to play. the only way that you can find out who you are is to go all the way into the people that you love.
Right.
And then what ends up coming out the other side is inevitably going to go through your own filter, this kind of semi-defined, semi-conscious thing of what it is that you want to do as an artist. And then it'll always sound like you. I mean, unless you're just straight up copying one player all day long.
And nobody can literally sound like that person, literally, yeah.
People don't really do that.
People are born with their own voices. They just don't. They just don't believe in themselves. Yeah.
The sound of their hand is in there.
It's always there. Yeah.
You know, we could sit down and play each other's basses and play each other's rigs with the exact same settings, and we're still going to sound like us.
So different. Yeah.
Right. Change a little bit, and you'll hear the thing that the other person has set up, but you're not going to hear the other person.
Yeah, because it's the touch, it's the fingers, it's everything.
And it's all the things that you listen to that are informing the way that your hand strikes the instrument. Even before your hand moves, you're already thinking the thing that's there. So I would encourage everybody not to think too much about, oh my God, am I copying this person? Instead, embrace
believing in themselves.
Yeah, believe in yourself. And if you're on the learning path, you know, and you're getting to a new player, go all the way into them. Learn by them, transcribe them if you're a different person. You know, play the whole thing. Find out why their hand moves in a certain direction. If you learn 3 songs by a certain player, you're going to start noticing that their hand, especially their left hand, does similar things.
Right.
And then you'll have a new vocabulary. It'll be mixed with the other players that you've been listening to, because hopefully you've been listening to more than one. And then what comes out the other side is you at that moment.
Yes.
At that moment.
The more you do it over time, it will just happen. Yeah.
Right.
Like I never searched for my voice. I never had that in my mind when, as a kid growing up, I was just listening to bass players, drummers, horn players, you know, and a lot of percussionists being in India, you know, tabla, kanjira, all these things. Yes. And I would always try and copy and study what they're doing. I would always want to see what a tabla player is doing. What if I can do that on bass? Like, how do I build a technique that I can do or kind of have that same syncopation, you know? So I build up my techniques and constructed.
And you can hear it in your playing. You can just hear all that kind of pouring out.
Right.
Amazing. And you know, meanwhile, I'm sitting here growing up. I mean, I talk a lot about metal, but what I was really listening to a lot was just a ton of David Gilmour, Pink Floyd, and that really open, spacious, melodic stuff. And so, you know, I'm always trying to find ways to be melodic, even though I don't play guitar. And have the composition land like that sort of thing. Right, so, yeah, our influences inform us before we ever actually touch an instrument.
The more you study, it's just gonna happen. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally. Awesome. So this question is actually taken from a lot of our videos on YouTube and stuff. How did you hear about me? When was the first time you heard about me?
The first time? Oh, God.
It's funny, but we've actually never met each other. We've met. I came for the Joe Satriani show.
No, I know that we've met, but I can't remember if it was Guthrie or Marco. Wait a minute. I mean, when did was it? Now I know I got the Steve Vai Modern Primitive album, and I heard that track.
Right.
But I knew about you, and that we had communicated before that happened. So I can't remember.
Yeah, even I can't remember. It wasn't
like 10 years ago or anything like that. It was more like 4 years ago or
4 years ago. Yeah.
It was before. It was before you did the tours with Guthrie. It was before that gig that you did at NAMM with Pliny, and all that. But I can't remember.
Me neither. That's so funny.
You know, this happens to me more and more these days. Just too many experiences.
Yes. But that's okay, as long as we're on the same page, even after so many years.
Exactly.
Awesome. Okay, we're on to the rapid fire round right now. Okay. So my first question to you is, what annoys you the most?
Losing time.
Yeah.
Not losing time as a
frustrating.
Player, not losing time as a player, losing time in life.
Losing time. Okay.
Like, something different. Like I was like, I had the plan to do this today, And instead, this other thing happened, and now it's going to take me 4 hours to unfuck that, and now my whole day isn't going to go the way that I thought it was going to go.
Right. So you're like the more organized kind of person who likes.
Yes.
Okay.
I like a plan and an agenda. I like that very
Right.
much.
Me too. Me too. I don't like wasting time. I'm like bang, 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 bang. Got
Yeah.
Yeah. If you could switch to any other instrument, what would it be?
When I was younger, I would have said drums, but now I would say guitar.
Guitar?
Yeah.
Cool. What is the worst compliment you've ever received?
The worst compliment I ever received.
Yeah.
Uh, it's funny. We're going to bring this interview back around to like the very beginning and talk about showmanship, where I can't remember when this happened, but it was sometime in the last 5 years where someone saw me performing, and I can't even remember who it was with, whether it was Satriani Aristocrats or whatever. And they said, "Man, you sounded great, and you looked really comfortable out there, man. I remember seeing you with Dweezil Zappa back in the early '90s, and you looked really uncomfortable on stage. Like you didn't really have your stage presence together, but now you look great." Something like that.
Oh God.
Just because it doesn't mean you need to say it out loud.
Yeah. That's rude. That was something rude. Like I remember I had one of my best nights, and then this guy comes up to me and he's like, "I like your dress." And I was like, after all the heavy lifting I just did, you like my dress? Cool.
Yeah. Hey, come a little closer. Come a little closer. How do you like my dress?
Yeah. Okay. Describe yourself in 4 words.
Oh God. Still much to learn.
Nice. Great. Good answer. Tell us something. This is the last one. Tell us something personal that the whole world don't know about you. Could be anything from day-to-day life.
Oh, something personal that the whole world doesn't know about me.
Or something that you do, I don't know, before gigs, after gigs, I don't know.
Well, the thing is that I there was a point there where I was really public about everything. So I'm trying to answer the question correctly. I was saying that something that nobody knows about me. I could say I like spending a lot of time alone, and there might be some people who know that already. But I suppose that would qualify for someone who travels a lot, live musician on stage, all that stuff, and I can probably seem outgoing and somewhat gregarious in a format like this. I actually require a lot of time alone.
So you like being home by yourself?
Yeah. I live in a really, really beautiful small mountain town north of Los Angeles, and all over the world. And as much as I love visiting different cultures, and I've seen so many beautiful things, and I'm really grateful for it all, there's nowhere I would rather be than here.
Right. Same here. Like with all the traveling and everything, after I come back home, I don't want to go anywhere. I just want to be home. Yeah.
So that's not such a big surprise after all, but that's what I thought of.
Yeah. Like you said in the start, it's so nice to be actually home, all this time to ourselves.
We don't realize, I think, as there are very few people who do the thing that we do with the constant travel for work. I mean, people who work in the airline industry, professional athletes, people in the military, and then some people who travel for a living because their job is always, that's a small minority of people in business, I think, these days, really, really traveling as much as we do.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of people out there who really know what that accumulated fatigue of travel feels like. There's a different kind of accumulated fatigue, of course, if you just have a regular life, if you got a marriage and 3 kids, and they're trying to get the kids to school and their after activities, because the baby was awake and all of that. Of course that's a fatigue. But there's a special kind of fatigue that comes with constant travel and motion. The illusion, if we're on a tour bus, is that we're just laying there and going to sleep. But the truth is, we're being hurtled through space at 70 miles an hour that's not resting. Sitting on a plane. We're not sitting still. We're being hurtled through space. That takes a physical toll on you And so to have just a period where none of that's going on is
Mhm.
incredibly refreshing and rejuvenating. But
Absolutely, so true.
eliminating that you're taking such a heavy toll so often.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Bryan, for coming on my show. It was my honor to have you.
My honor to be on your show, Mohini. It's really amazing. Thank God for the internet and travel and music that we can have a connection like this, literally
I
half
know, right?
the world, and be able to do something like this. It's pretty magical.
Thank you so much.